May 17th. The Spurs are dead. Long live the Spurs. It's ClipperBlog Live. Clippers lose to the Spurs 105-88. Andrew Hahn here with our normal panel of guests from Brooklyn, Charlie Widows. From Mountain Dew Can, Jordan Heimer. From Oceanside, DJ Foster. And joining us tonight, Kevin Arnovitz. Kevin, let's start with you. What was your take from this game?
Please see above Game 1. I think this is just... I don't think there's a lot of magic here. I think there's one team that is decisively more experienced, more system-based, more fluent in who they are and what they want to accomplish, and more varied in their skill sets. And so really, I know there's been this thing out there the last 2 days. It's just been this endless love fest for the San Antonio Spurs on various outlets. But, we saw it from the beginning of Game 1. They just play a different brand of basketball. Chris Paul said something interesting at the end of Game 7 in the locker room. He was speaking in great reverence about the Spurs, that it's the organization he admires most, and he said, this is probably 10 minutes after the Memphis Game 7, and he said, this series was all physical, and the next one's going to be completely mental. And I think when you take a look at the composition of the Clippers and you take a look at the composition of the Spurs, top to bottom, it's not surprising that the team that has won that mental battle is the one that is mentally and stronger, more cerebral, and just more versed in what it is they do. And that's what we've seen.
I don't disagree with any of that, except for the conclusion that, in fact, it's been the mental over the physical. I don't think it's taking anything away from the Spurs to say that, unfortunately, we didn't, or so far we haven't gotten to seeing the real battle in terms of there's a place where what the Spurs do ends, and just the Clippers, inabilities to do what they usually do begins. Chris Paul, 7 turnovers. Those turnovers weren't necessarily the result of great pick and roll defense. Sometimes he just dribbled off his foot. Sometimes he just got uncharacteristically frustrated and threw a forearm on offense. Blake Griffin, 1 rebound. He doesn't have any sense of really what he's doing on pick and roll defense. And so to a certain extent, yeah, the Spurs are doing all these things, but these aren't the best of the Clippers that we're seeing.
No. I mean, that's, to me, the Spurs are the Spurs, and that's going to happen. To me, I just kind of wish for everyone watching that we'd see the best of the Clippers. And obviously Chris Paul is the first one. And Blake Griffin is clearly not right. But on the other hand, like we've been talking about, he's physically able. He just doesn't know what he's doing on pick and rolls and on defense. And it's not going to cut it against this team that makes you miss. I thought maybe that the Spurs got better looks from 3, but they didn't. The Clippers made 9 threes. The Spurs made 10. It just wasn't. The Clippers couldn't get a stop. I know we say that you got to outshoot the Spurs, but I don't. You still got to play defense, and I don't think you can give up layups and expect to win.
Yeah, to me it looked like just the Spurs have counters for their counters and counters for your counters. They're like a great boxer in the way that they know what you're going to do, and then they completely plan for it and just pick you apart. And I don't know that the Clippers have what it takes to handle that. They don't make the right adjustments. I don't know. I felt like the Spurs pick and roll, the Duncan kept sliding into the paint. In the back line, there was nobody there. And yeah, that's a lot on Blake, but at some point, I don't know, but put Bledsoe in there and have him guard Parker. I thought that really disrupted things. I mean, I don't know. It's just your stars obviously can't play like that, and that's the big story, that they didn't get anything from Chris Paul and from Blake. But the Spurs are just too well-rounded and just have too much depth for the Clippers to handle. It's a mismatch. I mean, how many different ways can you say it? They're the much better team in every regard.
DJ, you said that the Stars just can't play for you like that if you want any chance of winning.
Yeah.
Do you feel like Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are going to show up, or is it the injuries or the schemes that the Spurs are playing on them? Is this just the way it's going to be for them?
Well, I guess the warning signs for me kind of went off when Blake couldn't score one-on-one against Diaw consistently. That's when I was like, okay, maybe he's not right. But defensively tonight, and I said this on Twitter, I thought that was one of the worst help defense displays I've seen in a long time, let alone playoff basketball. How many times did you see him just swiping at the ball? Or not even swiping. I mean, I remember Diaw got an offensive rebound right under the rim, and Blake literally took a step back to get out of the play. I actually owe you an apology, Andrew, because I laughed at the premise that that the Clippers should sit Blake Griffin because he's clearly not right. I said your best players have to play, all that. There's no time to rest, but the Clippers, I think, might want to rest Blake Griffin because he's not their best option right now. I'd rather go with Kenyon and probably even Reggie more than Blake. That's how bad I thought he was defensively tonight.
Yeah, and I hate to keep harping on the injuries, but there's a place where something can be an excuse and also an explanation. And when you ask Andrew, are they going to show up at Staples Center? I'm just not sure these guys have showing up in them at this point. You know, Blake had 20 points, but that's as empty a 20 points as you're going to see from Blake. Not only the fiasco defensively, but not moving around in the usual way on the offense, not giving you anything in terms of rebounding or running the offense through him off the, the central pick and roll. If I had one disappointment to follow up, Andrew, I also laughed when you said you should sit Blake. My biggest coaching disappointment maybe in the game was Vinny's staying with the starters for almost the entire third quarter, when it had become totally obvious through the first three quarters of the series that was one of the worst lineups the Clippers had going. So I don't know what you do in a situation where that sentence is true, that the starters are one of your worst lineups.
Yeah, they're getting pummeled, and this goes back to the Memphis series actually. And at a certain point, I don't know when small sample size becomes self-fulfilling prophecies, but pretty much you put those five guys out there, they're going to get hammered, and it's every single time out now. Wins, losses, physical games that demand spacing, it just doesn't matter. And I don't know. I was a little, the defensive effort was awful tonight. I thought help everywhere was awful, and part of that is a function of the Spurs. When you're constantly having to help, when you're constantly stretched, when you're Blake Griffin, and now all of a sudden you're accounting for, a guy like Diaw, who actually has to be accounted for at 16 feet, or maybe he floats out. It becomes a lot harder, and again, those aren't excuses nor are they explanations. But I do think that it's just they stretch you out to the point where help is just. It does require effort, obviously. You can't just swipe at a ball, but it's like every play demands help, and they don't even run like one-side actions. And again, I don't mean to fetishize the Spurs to death here, but it demands, it's what Chris said, it just demands a higher level of mental basketball. And yeah, I know turnovers aren't the function of their ingenious defense, and I don't even think the Spurs defense is all that ingenious, though. It's just it's pretty efficient. But they expose every last weakness. The Clippers have a lot of players who do one thing really well, and the Spurs have a lot of players who do a lot of things pretty well. And they find your strength, and they just mitigate it, and they find your weakness and they expose it. The Clippers are just a team that hates to be stretched defensively, and that's what the Spurs do. It's not particular to this series, but it's just an awful matchup for the Clippers.
Yeah, Kevin, just one question. At some point, we talk about rotations. If Randy Foye's knocking down shots, and we know that Eric Bledsoe and Nick Young are kind of what's been working, how how small can you go? I mean, can you play Chris Paul, Randy Foye, Eric Bledsoe, and Nick Young at the same time?
Well, they played. I mean, they once again played four smalls at a
Right.
certain point in the second half tonight. I just think you see the rebounding battle. You know, it'd be one thing other than Bledsoe. None of those guys. You know, even Butler's not a great rebounder. None of those guys are plus rebounders. It's not like having Jason Richardson out there, where, you know, here's a guy who can basically rebound like a quasi big. That's what you worry about. Also, you also see size, and we saw that Diaw has all of a sudden become this problem, but he's multi-skilled and he sort of knows where he's useful on a basketball court. It's amazing this guy was going to eat himself out of the league 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. It's pretty incredible.
Kevin, we know you have a plethora of other things you have to get to, so thanks for giving us some wisdom.
Cool. Yeah, I will be back.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
Nice, good.
Let's put Charlie's question to the rest of you guys. What can the Clippers do to forget about winning the series? Can we make it more competitive, DJ?
Oh, Jordan?
I'll go, DJ, but only by stealing your answer from the last CBL, which is you're not going to give people a new skill set between now and Saturday, so all you can do is at least give starters minutes to the guys who are playing at kind of starter quality. I was looking at the box score from the Pacers Heat game today, and it was starters minutes for the starters. It was everyone had 35, 36, 38, 40 minutes, and the reserves had 8, 10, 12 minutes. Okay, I think the Clippers at this point should be playing Nick Young, high 20 minutes, Kenyon Martin, high 20 minutes, Eric Bledsoe, high 20, low 30 minutes. At least go from there, reduce Karan's role a little bit. DJ, I know we talked about him having a good first quarter last time. He was horrific tonight. There were so many plays in the third where he was just lost, guarding nobody. Like you said, running back to a spot instead of finding a person to cover during transition. I think he's played his way out of the series. I don't know. Other than that, DJ, what adjustments?
Yeah. No, the whole starting lineup, basically, right? I mean, 1 through 5. None of those guys were effective tonight. And it's been a lot like that in the whole series. That, like Kevin mentioned, that lineup has just been death. So I think it's time to make some changes, to throw some different guys out there and just see what happens. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put it all on the rotations. Honestly, I think the Spurs are just too good. And I know that's a defeatist take, and any team can be beat, but I just don't see the Clippers' personnel, coaching, schematically. They're beat in every category. The Spurs are a better team. I don't, I wish I had a smarter answer than that, but the Spurs are better than the Clippers, and it's just kind of the way it is.
So here, Imran Q tweets with a possibility here. Does Vinny need to make subs earlier in the game? He seems to wait at least until 7 minutes have gone by in the first quarter. Charlie, do you think that might help a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, how many times do we have to say it? Eric Bledsoe should not come in with 2 minutes left in the first quarter. I mean, we can veil this talk about the rotations and stuff. There's one player who needs to be playing more than he is. I mean, it's an easy. I mean, that's why I brought it up with Kevin, because Randy Foye was hitting shots tonight, and so that's what complicates it a little bit. And then you kind of, at this point, you're talking about bringing in Bledsoe for Paul, because, and I think San Antonio adjusted a little bit to Bledsoe and kind of like played him how they played Paul last time, where it was like just force you into playing a little faster than you want. He had 4 turnovers. Obviously, he wasn't bad. He filled up the stat sheet again and had a positive plus minus. But yeah, it's, and to me, Caron Butler is, when I was thinking about like the keys to the series and related to Andrew McNeil's post about kind of what shot locations each team wants, Caron Butler is exactly the type of player that Greg Popovich wants to game plan for, because You run at him, he takes a pump fake and step in, and even if he makes that long two once in a while, it's still exactly the kind of offense they want you to run. Exactly. And against Memphis, that's fine because he's going to hit a few shots and Memphis isn't going to score that much. Against the Spurs, their 10th guy is knocking down threes with great efficiency. So, you can't match that with Caron Butler's style.
What do you do about Tim Duncan at this point? It's 2 straight games where he's destroyed the Clippers. What do you do?
I guess I'm kind of an optimist more than most when it comes to DeAndre Jordan. I just think in spurts you've seen what he can do just with length and athleticism and kind of lucking into some plays. He almost is so mismatched just mentally with Duncan that he's kind of that Chris Paul thing where he might get crossed over twice and end up back in the right spot, just because he's so long and athletic. And he's had quarters, maybe even halves. In game 1, I thought that was one of the biggest tactical mismanagements of Vinny was taking him out for, I believe, the whole second quarter. And at least, Blake's ineffective. At least DeAndre is going to give you that effort. Blake had 1 rebound tonight.
1 rebound.
We've seen that from DeAndre Jordan before, but we've also seen him in the playoffs more engaged. And, maybe Tim Duncan gets his, but at least you have a big shot blocker presence. They're not getting maybe all those layups if you have guys like Bledsoe in to help and a more active perimeter group with a guy like DeAndre back there.
I think Bledsoe's like maybe the Clippers' legit best shot blocker at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I would play him at small forward going forward. Just start Bledsoe at the 3.
Yeah.
But look, Charlie, I agree with all of that theoretically, and DeAndre Jordan does seem to be your great untapped resource, right? Like, we should be getting more from DeAndre, but it's worth noting when he came back in the game at the end of the first half, after not having gone to Tim Duncan and basically running through Manu and Parker for the entire second quarter, they immediately ran 2 isolations in the post for Duncan on DJ. He scored twice. So clearly the Spurs think DeAndre's back in on Duncan, time to just own him. I don't know.
Well, it's him and Kmart. I mean, that's you play the hot hand on defense.
I'm personally on board with Charlie. I think the only option is just put DJ on Tim Duncan, and just if Tim Duncan's going to have a good game, Tim Duncan's going to have a good game. Some of those shots that he made, they were contested. They were reasonably well defended shots, and he just put them in anyways because Tim Duncan is that good. He is the best power forward ever to play the game. So whoever you put on Tim Duncan isn't really going to slow him down if that's how motivated and that's how fresh he feels.
We're split. We're split on this side of the chat because I think Kenyon Martin would be a better option.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, I think you split the minutes, or those are the 2 options.
My one grievance with Kenyon Martin is that he generally doesn't seem interested in getting rebounds. Like, he'll play good one-on-one defense, and he had 3 rebounds tonight. Yeah. DeAndre Jordan led the team with rebounds at 7. So
the Spurs aren't going to kill you on the offensive glass like Memphis would, though.
They're killing the Clippers these first 2 games.
I think they had 6 offensive rebounds tonight?
6 offensive rebounds tonight.
I mean, I think as we talked about, that's probably a function of the Clippers being rotating everywhere and running all over the place and being out of position, and the long jump shots and just more active bigs on San Antonio.
I didn't even think it was so much of Duncan killing them in the post and one-on-one situations. I mean, he did do that. But he was slipping screens, every single screen, and DJ just doesn't have the awareness to that, hey, I can't hedge out this far because there was no screen there. Like, there's the ball handler's fine. Like, it's just little things like that. And DeAndre gets in his own head. You could tell he lost confidence. He didn't know when to contest shots because he thinks Duncan's pump faking. No, he's going up. Yeah. It's just like, I'll stick up for Vinny in those scenarios. You got to pull.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Right, and sorry, I know we don't need more talk on DeAndre versus Kenyon Martin, but it's DeAndre and Blake together in some ways that are such a disaster defensively because those 2 guys against the interior passing of DL and Duncan, there's just always someone fooling them. I mean, they're just getting killed.
You guys, Caron Butler is at the podium right now. He did not have a podium game.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, they had to put someone up there.
Yeah. Wait, is it 3 guys at the podium?
It's just singular Karan. I feel like there's like RC Buford and Pop are just like pulling the strings right now. Just whatever they want to have. Like send Karan up to the podium. How funny would this be?
I did the ledger tonight, and I was like, Bledsoe for third player? Like, who do you even put? There's no one else to really go there. It's one of
Maybe
those
they
types of
just
games.
maybe they sent Karan up there not to represent I'm at the podium because I had a great game, but to represent the like almost the platonic ideal of coming back. You know, like send somebody up there who's like he will give voice to the idea that this is still a series.
I think
Beautiful.
Chris Paul would give a better voice that he'll play better in Game 3. And Caron Butler at the podium. Good grief.
Listen, I mean, when it comes to Paul, we have to either he's really hurt or he's played really poorly a lot of times this playoffs. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. He's been very bad in a lot of games.
And by the way, just it has to be said, even though I'm the one who keeps saying injury. DJ made a great point yesterday where it's like, well, how injured could Blake be? I saw him doing a 360 dunk in the warm-ups. Chris Paul had a few moments tonight where he was breaking ankles, you know, where he was getting low and dribbling and moving quickly. So to just say it's just the injury definitely discounts the fact that, no, it's the injury maybe, but there have also been bizarre decisions.
Yep.
Losing his temper in places where he's turning the ball over because basically people are hounding him and he responds by pushing them in the face.
Right.
I mean, just things that's not the injury. That's dumb. That's bad play. We would criticize it if it was anybody else but Chris Paul.
Mental
that's what I'm
mistakes,
saying.
yeah,
I
totally.
mean, that's why he deserves the criticism, I think.
He's leaving his feet to pass and just stupid stuff you don't see him do. Yeah, it's definitely not all an injury, just like it is with Blake. I agree completely.
But have you guys noticed the Spurs doing anything hugely different with Blake and Chris Paul from the regular season games? Because it seems like, for the most part, they're playing him the same way defensively. Blake clearly is just there's something wrong with him. He can't break down Bonner and Diaw and Splitter on his own. If Duncan's guarding him, I understand. But with Chris Paul, it's not like they're sending those double teams that Memphis with Tony Allen and OJ Mayo and whoever else onto Chris Paul. He's still getting looks that he wants. It's almost like, and this is Jordan, this is where I want to say that the injuries do play a bigger factor. They can do what they want to do sometimes, but they don't know when that is, and it's really screwing with their heads, and that's what's causing a lot of these mental frustrations and breakdowns. Yeah, that's all I have.
I put in the chat box all take. It looks like ill take. So I wanted to let you guys know this take is not going to be ill.
It was definitely an ill take from Chris Paul this game.
Ill take from Chris Paul. I think what the Spurs are doing differently is, and it's been pointed out on a couple of the broadcasts, is that they're just zoning up completely whenever the Clippers try and initiate pick and roll, right? And they're leaving the roll man to do whatever he wants to do. If he gets the ball and it's up to him to make a decision. If that's Blake, that's fine. But here's the problem. They're not even getting to the point where there's a screen. They're forcing Paul the other way. The guy sits on his hip. Sebastian Prudy had a great post at Grantland showing kind of how the Spurs are defending it. I don't remember them doing this as well in the regular season. I feel like it's every pick and roll is just completely nullified. It's been incredible to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a great point. Blake Griffin hasn't set a screen since Oklahoma, I don't think, an actual screen. But the other thing is, you almost get the feeling that a hard double on Chris Paul would make things easier. You know, at least he gets the ball. He's smart enough to get the ball out of his hands right away, and then at least you have a mismatch. Whether you know how to exploit it or not, you have a 4-on-3 mismatch. With them, it's, Chris Paul technically has to just become a really aggressive scorer to beat how they're defending him right now, and it's kind of what Bledsoe did last game, and they played Bledsoe the same way they played Paul tonight, where it was just, as you said, zoning up, kind of staying in the lanes, making someone beat a zone, which is just difficult to do.
Twitter question here from Jonathan Ng. What do you guys think about the body language from tonight? They looked frustrated and made the help defense look lazy and bad. Jordan, how did you feel like, even though they lost, do you feel like I don't even know what they could be thinking. What did you think?
What do I think that I think they may be thinking?
Yes, about their body language. How do the Clippers think that they're done?
Do the Clippers think that they're done?
Are there forks in them as they're going back to Los Angeles?
My guess is, and well, you will not obviously hear any confirmation of this, Chris Paul, as we've been saying all season, is one of the smartest, savviest guys in the NBA. He's also, I know, the most competitive guy in the NBA, but I think this may be one point where his savvy is, I don't know, Andrew. I don't know what they're thinking. I assume that they know that they are done, that this team is better at basketball than they are, even when they are 100%, much less 80%. I assume that Chris Paul has no faith in his coach to outcoach the greatest living coach still going. All that being said, I don't know. Am I still talking about this?
I'll save you. I'm gonna throw you a lifesaver. I'll nibble a little bit on this question. It felt like to me every time I saw someone get pulled out of the game, they were so upset that they were coming out of the game, or upset about something in general. It's every time they're going back to the bench. Bill Simmons wrote about it a couple of weeks ago on ESPN that anytime Vinny pulls someone, the guy stomps off the court or sulks to the bench, doesn't look at anyone. Or it was like that with a lot of the guys tonight. So I can see where our Twitter question asker got that point from. It seems legit.
No, by the way, it was legit. I just gave a poor, stumbling, confused answer. I don't want to insult one of the 8 people who send us questions on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'll take.
Look, I don't think they think that. I don't think they think they've lost. I really don't. I mean, I think they're all like NBA basketball players who think they're the best players out there.
Right.
I think they know that they got their butt kicked twice, but I don't. I think they can probably go home and win too.
Okay. I've been on this rest. The Clippers should be resting Chris Paul, Blake Griffin bandwagon by myself for some time now, and I'm gonna pose another weird kind of situation. They have back-to-backs coming on Saturday and Sunday. Should the Clippers just rest Chris Paul and Blake Griffin? Forget about it. Go down 0-3. It doesn't really matter. At least get one good game out of it. Rest them for Game 3 and bring them back for Game 4 because I don't know how much more I can. It's like watching your favorite puppy just get shot in the leg and they're hobbling around on 3 legs. This is not the Clippers team that just. I guess it is that went into the grindhouse in Memphis and came back with one leg missing. Charlie, you want to get on board with me and just rest them for one game?
The one thing I will say to that is it will give credence to that group that is kind of playing if the Clippers do well, it's good for the Clippers, but bad because Del Negro stays. If he rests those guys for one of those games, either they'll win or he'll get fired. There's no question.
It does force Vinny to play Bledsoe like an ungodly amount of minutes if he rests Chris Paul, though.
Andrew's really appealing to us all here. He's trying to get Bledsoe more minutes for Charlie, get Vinny fired for me. You're the string puller.
Yeah, Andrew, you're just trying to set up some like Hollywood bad news bear moment here, where Reggie Evans plays 48 minutes and scores 26 points, and I'm just not sure that's the formula for a Game 3 victory.
Is there any formula for a Game 3 victory though?
I would play Blake significantly less if he shows that he doesn't have it early on. Paul, I think you have to stick with, though, because maybe I'm just biased and I like Chris Paul more than I do Blake Griffin, but I think normally he has better control of the game than he did tonight.
Yeah, and it's not just bias, although that may be a natural preference. I think it's also that you trust Chris Paul to be able to work with what he's got more than Blake Griffin. You feel like Blake Griffin is that, I used this last time too, but that young hurler who has no idea what to do on days that his stuff's not there. Whereas Chris Paul, he's going to play off the ball, he's going to be a spot-up shooter. He can still bring you something.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the narrative, but what have we seen?
Well,
You
say, Charlie, what else?
I agree. I mean, I want to think that, but I can't say that Blake Griffin's been worse than Chris Paul in this, in these playoffs.
No, you're right. I guess I meant purely in terms of if you had to bet on one of them turning around and having a surprising game without having, being at 100% physically, I guess my bet would still be on Chris Paul. But you're right. He's been terrible.
Just based on this conversation, the Clippers are done. Done. Right? I mean, listen to what we're talking about. Who's been worse, Blake Griffin or Chris Paul? Should we play Reggie Evans 48 minutes? Like, look at what this has come to. It's the wheels have fallen off.
The New York Knicks beat the Heat with Chris Bosh. One game. Clippers got to be able to beat them. Kevin's back.
Kevin's back, and I'm going to pose my crazy question to him. Kevin, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are just not the same. They look terrible 2 games in a row. Should the Clippers just sit them for Game 3 and hope that 5% healthier Chris Paul and Blake Griffin can win Game 4? Just forget about going down 0-3 because...
I have a better question, because that's not the interesting question, I think.
Okay.
The interesting question is, if you're Popovich and you're up 3-0...
Rest.
And Oklahoma City's looking like they're going to close out, and it's going to be a move-up series. Do you sit, maybe not all 3, I mean, I think do you sit Duncan on Sunday night?
Oh, boy.
Knowing that that series against OKC, if they sweep, I think that thing's pushed up till Tuesday or Wednesday.
Are you telling me that Boris Diaw and Thiago Splitter can't kill the Clippers? Because I think
my question. I mean, if you're, do you have the chutzpah if you're Popovich to do that? No, Duncan. I mean, Duncan would have played 4 games in 6 days. I mean, you're up 3-0 against the Clippers.
In the playoffs, yeah, on the road. Oof.
To be fair, when they were up
Just fly him
7-2
home.
today,
Fly him home on Saturday night. He can be in bed before.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I don't know. I just think that that would be fascinating.
I know Tim Varner would say start Patty Mills and just let that go.
I want a dinner with Bledsoe, Patty Mills, Tim Varner, and Charlie Widows.
Yeah.
Wow. That is...
Those circular banquettes. It would be fabulous.
Whatever money I have would go to that.
Andrew?
I'm completely. I don't know what to say about anything right now. I was just staring at these stats, and the Clippers can shoot 70% from 3 and lose by double digits. It's just ridiculous.
And that's why I think it wasn't as close as it appeared.
Yeah.
The Clippers. I was thinking 7 of 9 Chris's field goal attempts were from outside the paint, which is telling. They obviously, I'm sure you guys talked about it, they made Blake a jump shooter, basically.
But do you think that was the problem? I mean,
No, it wasn't a problem. That's my point is that they lost by 17. If you looked at probably expected field goal percentage,
right.
would they lose this game by 29, 30 maybe?
Hey, after Game 1, Chris said that he got every shot he wanted, he just didn't make them. Do you buy that?
I think you gotta. No, I mean, with him, there's always it's sort of the way he claims responsibility. But I thought he got better shots in Game 1 than he did tonight.
Right.
So, he got in the paint twice. Yikes.
Yeah. Is that just because of get into little X's and O's stuff?
Yeah, I actually, here it is. I wrote down a play. I pressed pause, and that's one of the reasons I was behind. Midway through the third quarter, and there's just this basic side pick and roll. Karan clears, and then Kawhi Leonard. And this is why they're so good. I mean, here's a rookie, a rookie. And he kind of follows Karan to about the edge of the weak side paint. But he's got one eye on Blake and Chris the entire time, just watching that pick and roll action as he still sort of is, shadowing Karan. And the minute, they sort of get into their action, he just kind of parks himself right. He decides, you know what? He communicates with Tim Duncan, essentially tells Duncan and Gary Neal, you got to zone up the back end because we're going to go Thibodeau for a second. And he kind of just parks himself right there, like kind of right at the intersection of Chris's angle and Blake's angle. And it's just all the while Duncan, because the ball ultimately gets kicked to the weak side for Karan, but Duncan has it under control. Yeah, there are 2 guys guarding 3, but he and Gary Neal know exactly what they're doing. and this is the kind of stuff that I just think, it won't show up in the box score, but it doesn't, but it's why they're effective. And I was thinking about this because Chicago and Boston operate on these precepts, which is there's no question, you always bring that third guy over. With the Spurs, it's very situational, and one of the things they demand of their players, and one of the reasons they always say, we get a certain kind of guy in here, is I think Popovich depends a lot on player judgment. Just like, look, make the defensive read. Kawhi, do you need to travel all the way over and then stay home on Karan? Is Tim the guy that's going to rotate here? Or are you going to be that third guy on this particular situation? I think there are coverages that do trigger things. I think they are doing that on most side pick and rolls. This was sort of an angle, so I wasn't sure. But that's the point, is it builds just, I think, trust in a certain brand of cerebral grasp on the game, because you're constantly, as a player on the Spurs defensively, being asked, okay, what's the best play here? How do I read this? And that's how you get a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who's been in the league for 5 minutes, who looks like a 10-year veteran, working in Thibodeau's system, because he just, all year, 56 times a game, he's having to make a help decision because he's on the 3 and the 1-5 are on the strong side, and it's like he's making that decision and there's a system, and it's awesome.
Kevin, is that talent evaluation by the Spurs then, or are they instilling that cerebral attitude into the players they bring in? Like Danny Green in Cleveland didn't look like the player he is now.
Yeah, this is a great question, right? I mean, is there something that they saw in Danny Green? I mean, this is where you really wish, and Presti operates much this way, I think, too, is, it's one of those you wish you could get R.C. Buford on a fireside chat and just ask him, like, what did you see in Danny? Obviously they traded to get Kawhi on draft day, a pretty good player, George Hill, who's helping the Pacers a lot. And, so it's kind of it's this cause and effect thing. Does a player become smarter playing in that system, or do they go out and recruit and acquire players who have this, innate intelligence for the game, who have a high basketball IQ? I don't know if it's nature or nurture. I suspect it's a little bit of both. In the same way, I always think, do cruddy organizations turn out idiots? Is it a coincidence that everybody who was on the Washington Wizards for the most part in the last 3 years we think of as dim-witted? Or was it a dim-witted system that produced dim-wittedness? And like now, JaVale McGee, you see fewer of those Keystone Cops plays now that he's like playing in a reasonably, good organization under a very good coach, right? And that's the question.
Putting a pin in that question for a second, Jordan, I know that you have to leave soon. Do you want to give us your final thoughts on this game and the series up to this point in general?
Oh, I think nothing that hasn't already been hit several times. We keep coming back to the same themes over and over. I hope to see Vinny show a little bit of imagination and flexibility heading into Game 3. I know that obviously the Clippers and the Clippers front office is aware of the same statistical stuff that we are and the same lineup data that we're talking about. And I hope that in Game 3 we see more minutes from the effective players. Not only does that include Bledsoe and Kmart, but that includes Nick Young and figuring out if DeAndre is effective on Tim Duncan. And I hope that at least the adjustments are made to give the Clippers the best chance to win.
Hey, Jordan, do you start Bledsoe on Saturday afternoon?
Well, as DJ said today, what made that substitution even more problematic in the first quarter today is that Foy was hitting some shots. So all of a sudden, Bledsoe gets a few extra minutes on the bench because Foy's hot. I think the idea of Bledsoe starting at point and moving Chris Paul over like Chauncey Billups did in the beginning of the season is a very attractive one if you go to Chris Paul and really ask him, are you not 100%? Do you not need, do you need to save energy by playing as a spot-up shooter? But if you don't do that, I don't know how you can do it, because I don't think you can play Bledsoe with the 2 for long stretches of time.
Offensively or defensively?
I think we lost Jordan.
Oh, the suspense.
Jordan doesn't want to leave, but his computer won't agree with him.
Yeah, I wonder about that, because clearly he can guard 2s.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you lose. I mean, what you essentially set yourself up for is a Ronnie Brewer sort of scheme, right? Because you don't have that stretch at that position the way you do with Randy or Mo or whoever, or with Chauncey. And it's an interesting question. I mean, I think, you know, I don't try to invest too much in lineup data and against, especially because I think each series is different against the Spurs. But Bled again, I think Charlie mentioned, was led the team in plus minus again, which I think probably says more about the ineffectualness of the starting unit than it does anything else. But I like Bled in the starting lineup. Then again, you know what? The truth is starter, whatever. I mean, if you give him 30, I mean, that's the point. Which 30? Yeah. I don't know. And actually, I kind of like him on Manu, too. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree the 30 is the 30, but we were talking about it while you stepped away. I mean, Chris Paul's the one who wasn't effective. Between him and Foy tonight, it wasn't. And obviously, you can't replace Chris Paul with Eric Bledsoe for any long-term basis, but just in a lineup, he was the one who wasn't under control.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we all know here that, if Chris and Blake aren't well, we're just, at this point.
Right.
What are we really talking about?
Yeah, Kevin, I just want to go back to one quick thing, because we were talking about Kawhi and the trades, and recently I've been embroiled in a lot of executive league mumbo jumbo.
Which is bizarre.
It's so bizarre, and I didn't care to start. It's so funny. But Hollinger was talking about Buford and his case for it, and obviously the financial aspect of the trade was at least some sort of a factor with Kawhi. He said that they didn't make the move with the finances in mind and then hoping it worked out. But don't you think that there was some aspect? I mean, obviously George Hill's a good player as well. I don't know. I mean, do you think that they thought Kawhi was this good right away?
You trade for a guy in the first round, a pretty good asset, and a good young asset in Hill, who's not going to be completely overpaid. Still has a good year left, particularly with a guy like, you don't really have a backup point. Though they did start the year with T.J. Ford, I think. Did they not? Or
yeah.
But no, I love the deal for the Spurs, and for many of the reasons Hollinger does, which is that a guy on a rookie contract in and of himself, is just playing at below market value if he can justify whatsoever, and Leonard clearly has done that. Hill might command. There are a lot of teams out there that like Hill. He's a guy who gets oft mentioned as somebody who could surprisingly get paid a lot of money. People love his flexibility, play the one, play the two, defend both positions, handle, shoot, and he's a really nice player. But I love the deal for San Antonio.
Yeah.
I mean, and I thought Buford did a great job. When I almost jumped in with you guys, not so much to referee, but it was sort of like, listen, I don't think there, R.C. Buford, what he did, what Neil O'Shea did, what Bird has done for the most part, I just think it's all three would have been good choices. I don't have my heart broken that my number 2 became the number 1 or this or that. I mean, to me, it's not even about that. It's about Danny Green at minimum. It's about, just Gary Neal, who've been like floating around summer league, and it's like, oh, and that guy basically starts a whole bunch of games for them. It's Diaw, off the scrap heap, probably doesn't work in any number of organizations. Steven Jackson, corralling him. I mean, it's just what he does and what he finds. It's just incredibly impressive, I think.
I would give it to Neal for other reasons based on that, but Neal had to have his pieces play under Vinny Del Negro, right? Buford has the luxury of getting anyone, and Pop will make it work. Del Negro, we can't really say that about. But Neal catered it to Del Negro and found some guys like, Kenyon Martin, and held on to Eric Bledsoe, and he got the best point guard.
Oh,
in
look,
the league.
O'Shea would have been my vote as well, but I don't. Yeah. It does not outrage me to see RC or would have seen to see RC Buford. I mean, Indiana, I'm a little less. That would have been my number 3 or number 4, to be honest. But I mean, I'm not going to get completely outraged. They've obviously done something right in Indy.
Right.
In addition to extorting $33 million from the city. So good for them for that, too, a couple years ago.
Andrew has an excellent question for us. Andrew?
It's not really a question so much as an observation. Starting Bledsoe in the backcourt with Chris Paul kind of reminds me of the adjustment that Carlisle made in the finals last year, putting Barea in, noticing that the Heat really couldn't contain him. It seems like that would be the natural thing to do, but then you get left with Randy Foye and Mo Williams as your two guards off the bench. I don't really know what to do about that. Kevin?
Yeah, I think you'd have to rotate out. You would. I think you would sit Chris. Maybe at the 9-minute mark of the first. Bring in Mo or Randy then. I think he's going to continue to go with 3 guards for long stretches. I don't know that he has a choice.
With Karan phased out?
Oh, no, I mean, I should say 3 guards of Karan. I mean, let me rephrase.
3 smalls.
4 smalls,
Right.
or 4 perimeters with Karan. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, which bodes well because this means that Eric will get more time. He doesn't have a lot of choices. I don't know. Do we have a pulse on Nick Young's? Was that a temporary energy, a funny bone, or was that real? That right hand he got.
I think the thing with Nick Young is he'd sprained his right thumb in the last series,
Right.
and
Exactly.
so someone might have just hit it again this time.
Okay, so that's what happened. Who starts? I mean, bringing Eric off the bench kind of to Matt, on the Ginobili cycle might be the best thing anyway. Who cares what the minutes are, so long as he's actually seeing court time. But it's amazing. I mean, I think, the thing we might take away from this postseason, and I don't want to, write the eulogy yet, but, a nice kind of classic series win over Memphis. And then, if this does for Bledsoe what it's done for other young players, this is a really productive series, even if they get swept.
Yeah.
I mean, if it all builds Eric's confidence, more important, if Vinny does come back, builds Vinny's confidence in Bledsoe, because that's hard to earn with him. He's just not a guy, I think, who's predisposed to trusting younger players. And it's easy for us to sit here sometimes and say, you should. It's hard when you're a coach and you know that there are young players with capacity for huge mental errors. That, for all of Mo Williams' failings or for all of Kenya Martin and Reggie Evans' failings, you kind of know what you're going to get. But for whatever reason, Vinny is, I think, predisposed toward the vets. And if this series does nothing but basically, convince a coach, if he gets his option picked up, that this is your 3rd guard and possibly your 2nd. That this is, you've got your 3-guard rotation, particularly if they deal Mo in the offseason, which I can completely see happening,
Mo could opt out as well, theoretically.
Mo's already opted in.
Yeah, he already accepted.
I thought he opted in for this year.
Right.
No, for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had a player option for the last 2 years.
Right. Next year he has an option that he's already opted in.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that funny about Vinny? I mean, wasn't that the whole thing on him? Was that he could develop young guys in Chicago, and then when he came here? I mean,
No, I think that's something that gets said because
Right.
they happened to be a young team, and I mean, it's not like, look, Rose is talented enough. I mean, I don't want to give Vinny 0 credit for that, but guess what? Rose was going to develop. He was the best young player in the draft. He was going to show up, and he was going to get better. I mean, that was the trajectory for this guy. But I think he motivates, and he's a motivator, and I think we often equate the motivator coaching archetype with, he's good with young players. I think Vinny trusts vets. And all things being equal, that's where he goes, obviously. I mean,
Last question for the panel. Clipper Buck wants to know, Are the Clippers losing this second round to the eventual 2011-2012 champions? Charlie, are they losing to the Spurs, who we can just crown as the champions right now?
No, I think Oklahoma's shown me something in the last 2 games that I maybe didn't see. I think San Antonio has just as good a chance, though. I don't know.
DJ, do you think the Spurs are far and above the better team in the league?
I'm watching out east. I think a Miami team with a healthy Bosch is still the favorite for the championship. But the Spurs, for me, I'd take them over Oklahoma City all day in the West. And if Boston or Indiana gets there, I'll definitely take San Antonio over both those teams as well. So they're my favorite right now.
Kevin?
I'm in DJ's boat here. I think a healthy Miami team, but here's the problem is even if Bosch comes back, it's not going to be at 100%. Abdominal strains, this is a 4 to 6 weeker. I've always been kind of a Bosch apologist, especially last year when I was in Miami. And he's such a part of their offense. People don't even realize it. It's just he's this sort of invisible guiding hand at the high post. So much of what Spoelstra likes to get accomplished. And he's a damn good pick-and-roll defender, too, something that doesn't get seen or said. And, you have to account for him all over the floor. So given the fact that we pretty much know that they're not going to be a completely healthy team,
Yeah.
I feel now obliged, or at least I have the allowance to move my pick over to the Spurs. I don't know if they're going to annihilate Oklahoma City, but I think they're better. I think this is the year before the year that Oklahoma City does that thing where the young team topples the old team. This is the year where, they get close, but, the Pistons ultimately triumph, or the Celtics ultimately triumph over the younger upstart.
How many straight wins is this now for the Spurs?
16.
16?
That's crazy.
They have not trailed in the final minutes of any game. The only time within 2 minutes of a closing of a game during this streak in which they led by less than one possession was a game against Phoenix when the Big Three sat.
That's absurd.
Their margin of victory, I forget what it is over the streak. It's double digits, so it's pretty incredible. And yet we look out there and it's still pretty amazing. Other than Parker, they don't have a guy in his prime.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's Manu's on the other side of prime, probably at this point, not entirely healthy. Duncan is 40,000 years old. Diao, Jackson, Kawhi's a rookie. Danny Green's kind of a question mark. He wasn't even supposed to be in the league anymore. Bonner. Thiago Splitter, maybe.
Right.
It's insane. It's just insane.
Yeah, your comment about OKC maybe being a year away from toppling the old guys, it kind of goes back to what I said at the very beginning, where everyone had this weird look like the Spurs are dead, long live the Spurs. It seems like every year someone's just it's their year and they're gonna topple the Spurs, and the Spurs just keep doing it. It's just like a machine.
The Spurs death pool is the least profitable death pool. It really is, and we all do it. We all engage in it. Because by all practical means, it should be over. For the reasons we've stipulated.
They are one of the worst on paper teams that you'll see when you're going up and down their roster. You're like, holy crap, Tim Duncan, and was born in 1954. You see all these random names, like you just mentioned, like Gary Neal went to Southwestern University of Missouri. Like, come on, who are these guys? But gosh, they find a way to throw it all together and make it work.
We have run exceedingly long tonight, so last question for Kevin. Twitter is abuzz. They want to know, Kevin, have you read all those books behind you?
This says nothing about my curiosity as much as my age. Yeah, I have, because I'm really old. And, you actually acquire a great number of books over if you've actually been out of college for like 15 years.
Give us a book rec on that shelf. Give us one that we need to read. Yeah. You can get the rolly chair. That's smooth. That's another.
If you have something with pictures, that would be good for me.
He's got some great coffee table material. I've seen a few.
Big font.
Yeah.
Howard fans, breaks of the game, and Darcy Fry's the last shot. So for readers, if you're looking for phenomenal summer basketball, beach reading, it's getting to be that time of year. It's the beautiful storytelling and reporting and breaks of the game is phenomenal. And Darcy Fry will absolutely transport you to Coney Island and sort of the outer reaches of the 5 boroughs where basketball is. It's almost as if it is the countryside of Indiana, but it's kind of this urban countryside. It's phenomenal. So I highly recommend both, and I've read both twice. So highly recommended.
There you go, from Kevin's mind into your ears. So, for Charlie Widows, DJ Foster, and Kevin Arnovitz, and I guess Jordan Heimer when he was with us before he disappeared. I'm Andrew Hahn. Thanks for tuning in.